and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, Thanksgiving has always been a big day for football fans, as they have not one, not two, but three matchups to enjoy on the holiday. However, this year it looks like us movie fans have our own matchup to enjoy, and that's Jurassic World versus Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Yes, I'm talking about a trailer throwdown, one confirmed, one heavily rumored for the holiday weekend. Let's start with the one we know. Jurassic World has been confirmed to drop their very first full trailer during the big football game. That's how football ties into this whole crazy conversation on Thanksgiving Day during the evening game, the third game. And it's going to be the Seahawks versus the 49ers. It starts at 8:30 on NBC, but the trailer is set to debut at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this is a wonderful bit of synergy because, as I said, this game is playing on NBC, and Universal, which releases Jurassic World, is under the same conglomerate from Comcast. So Disney's not the only one with some beautiful synergy going on company-wide. So that trailer is guaranteed to hit Thanksgiving night. I will be reviewing it, barring it being an exclusive, but I think they're going for as big an impact as possible, and I think it's a great idea, and it's going to be very exciting. The teaser trailer just dropped yesterday, 16 seconds, and it was a glorious 16 seconds, so I can't wait to see this thing debut. And as you might have noticed from the teaser trailer, the teaser to the teaser, they had a really beautiful, well-lit shot of Chris Pratt, because they know he's their moneymaker. All right, so that's the one we know about. So, stay tuned no matter where you are on the globe, and I'm sure everyone's going to want to see this. That Jurassic World trailer is set for 9 p.m. Eastern Standard on Thanksgiving during the football game. All right, so Star Wars, how does that factor into all this? Well, it's not confirmed, but it's heavily rumored that they're going to debut this trailer. But how are they going to debut it? This is the interesting part and potentially the damaging part. All right, so rumor has it that on Thanksgiving weekend, either Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or just Saturday and Sunday, when you go to see a movie in North America, well, in the United States basically, any movie, any showtime, the trailer for Star Wars: The Force Awakens will play in front of it. But the way that Disney's going to benefit off of this is that it's contingent on Big Hero 6 being the very first showing of the day in each theater, being like, if you want to rush over there and see it, you have to be there to see Big Hero 6, and that's the ticket you'll buy, and presumably you'll stay and watch the whole movie. So I think that's a very interesting way to get the trailer out there, but I think there are a lot of problems associated with it. Let's go back in time, shall we, to the Phantom Menace trailer when it debuted. Years ago, when we were all little kids or much younger, and we were all excited to see the return of Star Wars. Now, that trailer debuted on a specific movie. Again, it's one of those situations where they're trying to bolster ticket sales for one movie with the promise of showing you a sneak peek at another. So I didn't even remember the movie it was. I had to look it up. But it was Wing Commander, starring Freddie Prinze Jr., back when he was a movie star. And the whole reason anybody went to see Wing Commander, at least that weekend, was to see the Phantom Menace trailer. Now, this is how it actually went down. I was very excited to go. I went to see it, was there with my family, and it didn't play. So then we just got suckered into watching Wing Commander, and we were so upset that afterwards, my family went and found the theater manager, and we were like, the whole reason we even saw this stupid movie was to see the trailer for, the Phantom Menace. So what he did very kindly is he walked us into another theater where he knew it was going to play. He had to check, because it wasn't playing, and every theater playing Wing Commander, obviously, as I've so sadly found out, and let us stand there in the back of the theater and watch the trailer there. So there's always, problems that could arise. For instance, I recently tried to purchase my tickets for The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies. Fandango was like, oh, at noon, at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which was noon for me here on the East Coast, the tickets will go on sale. But then sure enough, there was a glitch and they weren't going on sale, and it took me all day to get the tickets until they finally released them, and I used up all the battery on my phone, and it was just like an annoying situation. Like, if you're going to have a big debut, make sure your debut works out. So I think there's a good chance that people will go to the theater being like, all right, where's my Star Wars trailer? And it won't be there. Then the other thing is, does this mean that it won't debut online, at least for 3 days? And I would say that this is a tactic you might have seen was recently used by Interstellar, where they would surprise drop these trailers in front of, for instance, I believe the first one played maybe with Godzilla, also maybe The Hobbit, Desolation of Smaug. I forget exactly when they started dropping these trailers, but they didn't put them online first. They debuted them in the theater first. And I think it really robbed it of a lot of its momentum, especially in our digital age. You can't trend on Twitter if you drop it that way. If you do a slow rollout, you can't get a lot of social media and responses, and that's really what drives a lot of theater traffic today and a lot of interest. So I think to do it, in person at the theater is a very old school idea that while I can appreciate J.J. Abrams wanting to do a nod to the past, maybe this is Kathleen Kennedy's idea as well, it just isn't feasible or aggressive enough in today's digital age. So I think it's a mistake to do it this way, and I'm kind of frustrated that now I have a situation where I'm like, do I have to get up at the crack of dawn and go over to the movie theater and be like, 1 for Big Hero 6, please, and then storm out of Big Hero 6 when it doesn't play, and they're going to be like, well, maybe it starts on Saturday. Come back on Saturday after being here on Friday. I'm like, how many times do you think I'm going to do this, especially during my holiday weekend when I'm supposed to be with my family and doing, Thanksgiving and then Christmassy stuff? I think it's just, there's too much room for mistakes and therefore frustration with your fan base. Just release it online like Jurassic World is doing. So I'm curious, what do you think of these two different styles for releasing the trailers? What do you think of having one during a football game on Thanksgiving Day? And what do you think of this in the theater release they're rumored to be planning for Star Wars? And what do you think of them doing it on a holiday weekend? I feel like one of those employees who has to work those late night Thanksgiving Black Friday sales. I'm like, all right, turkey dinner. I should be done eating by 8:30 though. But it's like, got to take a break. Everybody on the West Coast is going to come smack in the middle of their Thanksgiving dinner, likely. So what do you think of them doing it during the holiday weekend? Or do you think they should have waited to do it during, regular, quote unquote, business hours? And which one, of course, are you more excited about, right? Which one do you want to see win the weekend in terms of buzz? Because there can only be one winner. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day has to do with Stephen King's The Stand, which got a lot of news, a lot of traction on Friday when it was released, that Josh Boone, who directed The Fault in Our Stars, had gotten the green light from Warner Brothers to not just make a film adaptation of The Stand, but a multi-movie one. And it's a very interesting situation, not only from, how it's coming together in terms of franchises in Hollywood with Warner Brothers and Josh Boone, so let's discuss, all right? So Stephen King usually writes horror, but he's kind of expanded his career. Of course, he's famous for his horror films, but he writes a lot of, somewhat science fiction these days, grander ideas, more epic in scope, like The Dark Tower, something that Warner Brothers also tried to bring to the big screen and the small screen. As you might recall, they were working with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer to do this really ambitious project, which was like a trilogy of films, but then in between the films there would be a TV show you could watch, and while Brian Grazer and Ron Howard are still working on that, Warner Brothers dropped out. They were like, maybe it was too ambitious for them. So Josh Boone, having directed The Fault in Our Stars and only one other movie, Stuck on You, it's Stuck on Love. Stuck on You is that Farrelly Brothers movie. He directed, let me see here, I just want to make sure I get it right. Yeah, Stuck in Love, which never even got an official release. It just kind of, leaked into theaters and then went down the drain. But apparently, Fault in Our Stars, as you know, made a big impression with people, got a lot of press, and I think Warner Brothers, for some reason, is like, okay, your reward is a multi-movie, major epic, science, post-apocalyptic, that's how it's described, drama. So Josh Boone, what he did originally, though, is he just pitched them the idea of a single film. He's like, okay, I think I figured out how to compress this into a single movie, even though it's like a 1,000-page long book, 1,000+ pages. And this is something that you might recall The Last Airbender suffered from. They tried to adapt an entire season of the animated show into one movie, and the result was sorely lacking because of the time compression. So he takes this to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers goes, hey, we appreciate your pitch, and we're glad you pitched us one movie, but how'd you like to make 4 movies? And Josh Boone was like, yes, please. And anybody would be like, yes, please. Because, of course, we're living in the age of the franchise, when Hollywood wants to not just release 1 movie, not even 3 movies, as many as they possibly can release. And they want to spin it off into TV series and theme parks. Look at what they're trying to do with The Hunger Games, although, as we'll discuss later in Movie Math today, with the decreased debut, 30 million below the first 2 films, perhaps there isn't an audience for a Hunger Games theme park, TV show, etc. So, very risky strategy. And it's not by no means something that can be definitively done by Hollywood. Not every franchise is apparently Harry Potter. But anyway, Warner Brothers, maybe they're looking for something to replace The Lord of the Rings, which of course is coming to an end now with the final Hobbit film. So they're like, okay, let's substitute it with the Stephen King series, it's based on another well-respected novel. As again, this story got a lot of traction when it debuted on Friday. A lot of people are interested in it. I'm sure Warner Brothers was watching that closely and was very excited. So they said, Josh Boone, you want to make a couple of movies? And he said, yes. So Josh Boone is selling this as the godfather of post-apocalyptic films. And I'm sure that the Mad Max Fury Road is like, wait a minute, I think that we've called dibs on that. So let's see how that turns out when that film is released in 2015, which looks also very good. So that's going to raise the bar, I think, pretty high for post-apocalyptic films. Now the question I have, is Josh Boone the right man for the job? right director for the job. Because again, he's only directed these 2 films, and this is something that's supposed to be epic in scope, and it's multi-film, multi-movies, no less. Now you might say, well, what about Peter Jackson? He jumped right into The Lord of the Rings. It was the first major film he'd ever done, first blockbuster, and he came from doing much smaller films. But I would say while his films were small, they were ambitious. For instance, The Frighteners was the big movie he made before he did the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I think it really got him a lot of attention here in the States and allowed him to leapfrog into Hollywood and make Lord of the Rings. You know, he used Frighteners as that launching pad. And that was a film that I still remember to this day because it was very disturbing, but it had very interesting special effects. Do you remember when, I think it was Jake Busey, Gary Busey's son, like came out of the staircase? That was fantastically well done. And I think it really points to Peter Jackson as someone who always tries to reach beyond, what he has at the moment. He doesn't let himself be restricted by the budget of the film and, whether or not it's a big release. He always goes for the best he can do. And that's something that's been clearly a part of the success of the Lord of the Rings films and the Hobbit trilogy that came after it. So I think that that's where I see that spark of creativity, of ingenuity that led to this, multi-billion-dollar franchise. And I don't see that with Josh Boone. He's done 2 romantic comedies, and one of them, again, didn't even get an actual legitimate release in theaters. So I'm curious what you think of this. What do you think of The Stand being a multi-film, project? I think this is film's answer to TV, because they're like, hey, look, TV's beating us because they have hours and hours to tell their story. Let's just do the same thing. And and I think Marvel's doing this quite well by having almost like a television mentality to their Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that all the stories string together and they're actually telling one giant story. Very, 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 very clever. And so I think this is what the movie studios are doing to fight back television. So I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think The Stand is a good property for Warner Brothers? Will it be able to take the place of The Lord of the Rings? And also, what do you think of Josh Boone? Is this a guy who can get the job done? All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day is about Mr. Channing Tatum. Yes, he's in the news again. There isn't a day that goes by where you don't hear something about Channing Tatum, and I think that is to his credit and also his publicist's credit. But they aren't just making up stories. These aren't like tabloid things. He's actually moving his career forward, and Channing Tatum is wasting no time building on what he has. He's not waiting for it to disappear, to lose some of its momentum, and so he's just sprinting towards really establishing himself as a reckoning power in Hollywood. So what's next? What's he doing now? Well, it looks like he's going to direct, and this is a very exciting step in his career, and I think it's a brilliant way to capitalize on his Foxcatcher momentum, where he plays a very serious role, and then also producing the Magic Mike films. Now there are 2 of them, a second one's coming out, it's hotly anticipated, and he's a producer on that. He spearheaded that, he brought Steven Soderbergh into the mix and did quite a good job. So this is the logical next step in his progression as a Hollywood talent, right? Now, the project that he's chosen is something that I think is a little bit of a potential misstep. I don't think this is the right property for him, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, who would have ever guessed that Channing Tatum would direct before, say, Leonardo DiCaprio or Brad Pitt? He's really raising the stakes, and I think that if he succeeds in this way, look for other actors like that, actors turned producers, to do the same thing. But Channing Tatum, you gotta respect that he wants to prove himself, and he doesn't want to, it's not just enough for him to be successful, he wants to prove himself as a talent. And he's going about it in a much more politically savvy way than Leonardo DiCaprio. Why is Channing Tatum having so much more success? Fascinating, fascinating discussion. So let's just remember where he is right now. He's got the, G.I. Joe to some degree. He's got the Jump Street franchise, Magic Mike, which he produces. He's going to be the new Gambit. He's going to be in X-Men Apocalypse. He's getting a solo film. He's a major awards contender for Foxcatcher, his turn there. And he just has so many things on his plate. Oh, and yes, of course, he is the driving box office force for Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight, with a role in that film as well. Very, very exciting. Also, someone that DiCaprio teamed up with, as we all remember very well in Django Unchained. So what's the property that Channing Tatum is going to direct? It's called Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock, and it's by the same author who wrote Silver Linings Playbook. Huge awards winner, of course, from David O. Russell and company. Jennifer Lawrence won her Oscar for playing that role. Bradley Cooper was a really important film for him as well, which he produced, but didn't win him an Oscar. We'll see if he fares better with American Sniper. But this is, the author is Matthew Quick, and this is Matthew Quick's young adult novel. Now, it's a very difficult subject matter. It's about a troubled high school student who decides to kill his best friend and then himself. So there, the please forgive me, Leonard Peacock, because I'm going to kill you and then kill myself. Now, this is a very delicate line to walk, and if Channing Tatum can have a rip from the headlines quality, well then this might just work. But it could be a little bit too soon. because of all the horrible shootings we seem to read about, monthly or see monthly on the news with just another shooting in a high school. It's just so tragic. So this is something that, is going to have to be taken very seriously. And again, it's going to be a very fine line to walk. Channing Tatum, this isn't just do you direct a good film, but can you handle the political aspects of it correctly as well? It's a very difficult thing to pull off. Again, it helps that it has this writer behind it because Silver Linings Playbook is such a strong pedigree for the film. But it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be difficult to make the character, especially the lead, sympathetic. How are they going to pull this off and make this a character you want to spend this time with? It's going to have to be something that calls attention to this problem and potentially gets a conversation going about maybe gun control in this country, etc. That's the place this movie is going to have to go, I think, to really be successful. Now, you might recall that We Need to Talk About Kevin, which came out in 2011, also dealt with an act of violence in a school. I don't want to give anything away about the film. It's a very good movie, but it didn't get any awards traction, any traction at all really in 2011, and its director, Lynn Ramsey, hasn't worked since. Tilda Swinton starred, and of course she always is working consistently in the indie field. But Ezra Miller, this was a big movie for him, and he went away for a while too after The Perks of Being a Wallflower. He really hasn't been able to build anything out of that until, of course, he landed the Flash gig. So that all ended up working out quite well for him, at least so far. We'll see how he's accepted in the role. But still, We Need to Talk About Kevin, very similar subject matter, wasn't able to go anywhere and didn't do anything for Lynn Ramsey's career. So Channing Tatum, I think, if I were, his management team, I'd be like, isn't there another book? Can't we just spend another week looking for another book? Because here's the thing, with Foxcatcher and Magic Mike, the two films, I think, which have gotten him to this point of directing, and he's able to do it, they were both films where Channing Tatum was able to contribute something to the role. With Foxcatcher, he plays a wrestler. There's a big physicality about the role. I think his dance background comes in handy quite a bit. And also, I think it builds off of Channing Tatum's image, a little bit of the dumb jock, which he so cleverly plays with in the Jump Street films. I think he also is playing with it in Foxcatcher. And he's anything but a dumb jock, as I think he's proved, but he's very clever to build on that stereotype in an interesting way. And then with Magic Mike, he embraced his stripper past. He actually was a stripper. He said, hey, look, it's a dark world, but, it's not anyone can fall into it, or, someone that like myself, me through my movies. Let me show you what it's actually like to be a male stripper, the highs and the lows. And that's what he did. And so he was kind of like our guide into that world. And so he brought something very personal there as well. So unless there's some background story that Channing Tatum can bring to this, I don't know how it benefits him to make this kind of film. All right, so I'm curious to what you think about Channing Tatum as a director and Channing Tatum as a director of Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock. And has anyone read the novel? Is it good? Do you think it would make a good movie? And is it anywhere on par with Silver Linings Playbook? All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from Lindsay Hawkins. And Lindsay Hawkins says, hey, Grace, I love watching morning movie news every day at lunch. Oh, excellent. As I always say, I'd love to hear how you guys watch the show and how you make it a part of your day, which I'm honored that you do. And Lindsay continues saying, I'm a fan of all your BTT channels, and I have a question for you. I would like to get into animation, and I was wondering how to get into the industry. I'm still in school, so any classes I could take are helpful. Thanks for the great videos, and I hope you can answer this question. Of course I can, Lindsay. As I always also say, I'm always keen to help people find a way into the industry, particularly when you want to go and work in some of the many exciting fields that aren't the most well known in the media, like writer, director, producer, actor. There are plenty other ways you can be not only a part of the Hollywood process, but a vital one, and have a very rewarding and successful career. And animation, of course, is one of them. Animation is one of the best, fields in the entertainment business today. There are so many opportunities, so many animation studios, and so much product. So, Lindsay, how can you get into it? Well, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is that you really need to study it, and you need to go to an animation program. You can't just take a couple of classes at school, I'm afraid. You need to get a degree in animation and really study it, because there's so much technical aspects in it. I did a tour of Blue Sky Studios back when Epic was coming out on Blu-ray. I'll put a link to it at the end of this video, and you can get an idea of the different jobs that are in computer animation. It's a little bit different than hand-drawn animation, the way they break down the process and who does what. But it's very interesting, and it'll show you that there's so much technical expertise that you have to have in addition to your storytelling skills. So you need to go to school. So that's the bad news. You can't just take a few classes. You need to actually legitimately go and study this. The good news is that they actively recruit from the top schools. And there are a couple of top schools. So this is an industry that is hungry for talent. It's not as hard to break in as live action, and they're looking for people to come and work at their animation studios. So if you can get into one of these programs, I think their odds are very good you'll get an actual job in the animation industry. And you can totally get a you can study this as a graduate program. There are plenty of MFAs available. All right, so I've put a link down below to the top schools for computer animation. There are 100 of them. I think that only the top ones are going to be aggressively recruited from by the animation studios. Of course, any studying you can do is good. And then you can always make up for it on your end with how aggressively you pursue a job, with the human resources. Again, these studios, they actively hire, they do it in-house. It's not like live action where they're done through a production company. It's almost like the studio system still exists in animation. So they have everybody working at the company. Now, there have been cutoffs, as you've heard. Every business has ups and downs, but still, this is a lot better to break into than live action. So anyway, there are a couple of schools. You can look at this list. The ones that I would recommend are CalArts, USC, and UCLA. And that's because not only are they very good programs that are highly regarded in the industry, the animation industry, but they're in California, they're in Los Angeles. So you'll be right there, and a lot of times people from these animation studios come and they speak to the students in these programs. And you can start to develop a relationship with the people you need to work with and to hire you. And also, if you're there in California, you can get an internship. And internships are great. There's been a problem with internships in Hollywood lately about, companies being worried about being sued, rightly so. They don't want to exploit people. But it also, at the same time, has made it a little bit harder to break in. So try and get one of those internships. And even if you don't, Lindsay, you might want to try and get an internship now. See if you have to be studying animation. Take a look into that. Go to your big ones and see what kind of opportunities are available. But you're going to have to be in Los Angeles. They have a couple animation studios, obviously, overseas. But, if you want to do anything in the United States, it's going to have to be out of California, Los Angeles. So go and see what their internship programs are like. See if you can get in. Start developing a relationship with those places. And then that's really the path to getting a job in an animation studio. So I hope that's helpful, Lindsay. I think that's a great goal. And I think it's a very exciting one. And animation is definitely a really wonderful field to be in right now. And it's one of the, some could say the top of its game. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.